We are still going through the papers with broadcaster and host of the Blethered podcast, Sean McDonald, and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth. And Sean, let's come back to you, shall we? And this is in the Eye about a royal superfan arrested at the coronation because she was stood next to eco-protesters.
Yes, so this is Australian architect Alice Chambers. She travelled to central London waiting to catch a glimpse of the King during his coronation. She was arrested on suspicion of potential to cause a breach of the peace, and they bother George Orwell, at about 9 a.m. because she happened to be near another dozen people who were arrested again on suspicion of causing disruption. She said that during her 13-hour ordeal, she was repeatedly questioned. She was subject to physical searches, held in a cell, had DNA fingerprints and her pictures taken, all the while tearfully trying to explain she had no idea what was going on. She didn't know why she was there. The Met Police have said the arresting officer was from Lincolnshire Police and it's for them to deal with, and it's been passed to the relevant force to investigate. If anybody watched last week, they would have seen me going mental about this. The powers that were passed on to the police and that were given royal assent very quickly in order to arrest people. I obviously understand it's a unique situation. You know, tensions are probably high. The police are told, do not under any circumstances allow any disruption. You cannot arrest people because you think they might cause disruption. You cannot arrest people because they're maybe going to be holding placards or saying, not my king. That's your democratic right. And I think this is the perfect example, and my sympathy with Alice Chambers is really high. Imagine what she must have been thinking the whole time. And she also said that she goes to these things by herself. So she was released from even when they realised there was a serious mistake made, it took a further 2.5 hours to let her go from Wandsworth Police Station. At this point, this poor woman is in a part of London she potentially doesn't recognise and being set out, let go after 13 hours of being locked up. Serious lessons should be held, and I hope she is used as a sort of poster case for why this absolutely should be nipped right in the bud.
Do you reckon, Candice?
Yeah, I'm largely in agreement. I mean, I think the questions need to be asked about what went wrong at the coronation with these protests. Obviously, you need to stop disruption, and I think the police were just like, pick your poison, right? Be criticised for shutting down the protests, or be criticised for letting them ruin the coronation, if that's what they were planning to do. We don't know that. That's what they claim, that they had intelligence that they were going to do something. All these groups say that is not true. We were liaising with the police the whole time, and suddenly they just arrested us.
But they were, the police, certainly said at the time, look, they were, with some of the placard business, they weren't arrested because they had placards, but some of the stuff that they saw there were locking on devices.
Yes, this
so they can lock themselves to railings or to each other, or...
Yes.
That was the suspicion.
Yes, that was the suspicion. I mean, the thing is, what a lot of people have said is you can't arrest people for pre-crime. Obviously, you can arrest people, though, if you think that they're going to do something, if they're plotting something. I mean, you don't always just wait till they've committed the crime.
No.
I think this was very badly mishandled, though. In a free country, you absolutely have the right to say, not my king, and you should be allowed to do that. And it's not ruining the coronation. I think we need to see, though, what the police's intelligence was, what they thought was going to happen, and if there were enough grounds to arrest these protesters. What happened with this woman, though, is truly appalling.
Yeah. I mean, it is our democratic right to protest, but Sean, there are reports in the papers this week that apparently rape alarms were found on some protesters. They were planning to throw it in front of the horses. I mean, can you understand at that point where you'd be endangering the lives of the public, of the people that were riding those horses? You'd spook them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be a sort of measure of what is the greater good or the lesser evil in this sense. I think even the most ardent arbiter or defender of free speech and democratic rights would have to be incredibly naive to think that the police aren't going to take things a lot more seriously, because it was a huge event, whether you agree with it or not, whether you're for it or not. So you have to be realistic here. But if the police are saying this, that they found whether it's rape alarms or they had, we had intelligence that people were going to throw paint was one of the things that they said, then to that I would say, well, you have to present that evidence. Otherwise, we're going to have to assume that you're making it up until such times as you kind of say, look, here's what we...
But this is where we have to be very careful, because we're all making assumptions, and for people who, we need to see that evidence, don't we? I know some people have been released without charge, some people it will go further, and therefore you have have to see, don't you? We almost have to force ourselves to wait a little bit on this one.
Yeah, definitely. I think lessons should be learned. Let's hopefully have this as a bit of a black mark, but let's have a positive outcome. Let's learn from it. And this was exactly the point I was making last week. And Eamon, understandably, was referencing the Stop Oil protesters and saying, why should I be stopped getting to work, getting to my event? And I said, no, I completely agree with you. But in this instance, it should send a shiver down your spine when there are powers granted to the police to be able to arrest people for very minimal things, or for, like we said, pre-crime. And here we have an example of someone who potentially on the surface could have said, yeah, that's it, arrest them. You two were arrested, and it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, which side of the political divide. It should kind of make you think, oh no, because it's all well and good when it's not you, but if it happens to someone else, then it could very easily happen to you.
No, it's an interesting one. Any thoughts on that? Let us know. Let's have a look at the Times and Eurovision. Presidents, actually, I'm a bit torn on this one, because I just don't know. I mean, Eurovision have said, or the EBU, the European Broadcasting Union, have said President Zelensky can't make an address to the Eurovision tomorrow night because it would be political.
Yes.
And that's not what they do.
Yes. So
but he is the president of the host, or the winning nation, who should be the host nation.
I know. This is such a difficult thing. Apparently he was also turned down for the Oscars as well, but he requested to make a speech there and they said, no, it's not a political event. I think we do need events that aren't political, that are maybe outside of the news and the politics cycle. I completely understand why Zelensky wants to do this. I think a lot of people would appreciate him doing it. But I do think we do need things which are apolitical. I think it's important for society to take a step back from politics. And to have forums for that.
I completely agree. If President Zelensky was given the opportunity to use Eurovision as a platform, I certainly wouldn't have had any objections. But I completely agree that, it would be good to just have, I don't know, just a little bit of shelter from that. I'm actually, for the first time in my life, going to a Eurovision party in London tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't think of anything worse. So I'm very sorry to the person who's invited me, but I'm sure it will be a laugh. I've never actually watched Eurovision.
Stephen's been to a party.
Well, I went to the Eurovision, the London Eurovision party where you see all the acts and things, and that was great. I haven't watched it for years because I'm always working the next morning.
There's been a few good songs recently. I heard you talking about, how is this? Is it Loreen, the one who?
Oh, Loreen.
How is she getting to go back on again if she's already won it?
Oh, you can do that.
That's what I said.
You can do that.
I thought one.
There's no rules against it,
Right,
Sean.
okay.
No.
Very good tune. I was in the bathroom when I heard you talking about it and I was singing.
Oh, well, there you go. There's an image we could do without. Thank you both very much indeed. Don't go anywhere. We've got the latest GDP figures and we'll tell you what they mean for you very shortly.